and I'm glad that all of you have in some way engaged with this topic. So my name is Lauren. I'm the president of the Voice of Congo Society, and we aim to raise awareness of the injustices that are happening in the DRC today. I'm a second-year student. So we're going to start our discussion talking about the leadership in a lot of African countries, why leaders overstay, voters' rights, and the future of governance and voting. But before then, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our panel. Thank you all for coming here, and I will introduce them individually in a second. Before I do that, I'm going to lay out some housekeeping rules. So obviously you can see that there's some people filming and taking pictures, so the filming will hopefully be up by maybe next week, maybe. Hopefully, and the pictures will be up as soon as I get them. So also thank you to Angie for coming in for quite a while. Also, how the session will be conducted, so I'm going to have a set of topics that I'm going to ask the panel and some questions. So when they discuss it and answer the questions, we're going to open it up to the floor. We want this to be as interactive as possible. It's amazing seeing a lot of, I guess, Africans here, so I know there's a lot of personal experience that can come with that, and talking about your own country as well. What else? There's no microphone for audience if you do want to speak. Unfortunately, this is the only lecture theatre in SOAS that doesn't have a wireless system that allows for a microphone. So please just stand up and talk loudly so everyone can hear you. If you do answer questions, please make them as brief as possible, because we do want to hear a lot of voices today and a lot of answers. So just bear that in mind. Also, if you haven't already, put your phone on silent so we're not disrupting the conversation that's going on. And yeah, so now I can introduce our panel. And again, thank you so much for all of these experts for taking the time out to discuss a topic that is very dear to all of us. So I'm going to start with the person closest to me, Richard Semitego, Director of African House, politician, co-founder of African First, and good governance advocate. Then we have Francine Mukwege, human rights activist, founder of Kutunga Yamboka, and Friends of Congo UK representative. Then we have Samira Sawami, writer and journalist in politics, economics, and development in East and Horn of Africa. And then last but not least, we have Jamie Hitchin, policy researcher at the Africa Research Institute, and he's also been published in the Human Rights Papers. So can we please give a warm welcome to our panel. So of course we're going to start with a country dear to me, where I'm from, Congo. So as some of you may be aware, in 2016 Kabila, who is the president, well, depends what you define as a president, has breached his constitutional limit. He's entered into an illegitimate third term. And even though the UN Secretary Council has demanded elections in 2016, this was last year, through the work of many amazing Congolese activists who have really pushed that through, he has stated that he's basically questioning it, and that he will be moving towards election, but not what quote-unquote foreign dictates on setting a date for the historic event. So I'm going to start off with our Congolese representative on the panel. So how much do you believe this as an activist and someone who's lived in Congo and has seen his tyranny in Congo? How much do you believe this statement about him organizing elections in the near future, but not when foreign powers dictate that?
Oh, thank you so much. Bear with me, I speak French. Okay. Kabila is someone, I'll start with someone Congolese basically never chose him in the first place. Kabila is someone they imposed to Congolese people in 2001, and he was only 29 when they imposed him to Congolese people. So he used to be a child soldier. Kabila is someone really, he doesn't care about Congolese people. And when we had election in 2006, he didn't win the election, but he stayed. International community kept him there. And in 2011, the same thing. And this term actually ended in 2016, December 2016. But he refused to organize the election. He said there's no money. Congo is a rich country. It's one of the richest countries in terms of mineral. We have everything. We have coltan for all of us to get phone, laptop. You need Congo. We have cobalt. We have copper. Everything. Diamond, gold. And Congo has the second biggest rainforest after the Amazon. We have everything. I was born in Congo. In Congo, you can find diamonds in your house, just like this. So, Congo gives to the world 24 trillion per year. But how come Kabila's got 15 billion in the bank, but he can't organize the election? The problem is, as Congolese, as young Congolese, we all know the problem is where the problem lies. The problem is international community with the mineral. Everybody wants a piece of Congo. It has been always like this since King Leopold II. So Kabila there, when international community say we want Kabila to step down, we know they're lying because Kabila has been giving them access to mineral. We have to be honest. 48 women, Congolese women, have to be raped per hour for all of us to get a phone, include me. That's unfair. So Kabila refusing to step down we knew, I personally knew. I remember I went to the parliament here in the Common House, and then the UN representative said, okay, Kabila said that he has no money, so we Congolese people should come together and have a dialogue. I asked that person, that MP, and then all the people were there at UN. I said, could you imagine in this country when Theresa May term ended and Theresa May will say, I don't want to organize election because there's no money. British people go crazy. So how come you are asking Congolese people to do the same? We knew he's not going to organize election. In fact, he will never organize election. Kabila came by coup. He has to go by the same way. So that's a problem, and this is why we Congolese people are organizing, young people are organizing on the ground. I'm working with a lot of young people on the ground. We organize on the ground. We have to do revolution. Because if we don't, Kabila won't step down, and the international community, I'm really sorry, they don't really care. Yeah. They don't. It's all about mineral.
Can I interject there a little bit? So, everything... Thank you for that great overview. For people who don't know the situation that's happening in Congo, Francine touched upon every single point that we're going to really go in depth with our panelists as well about the countries that they've researched into and they've represented. But I'm going to do something a little bit more unorthodox. I want to actually turn to the audience first to see the kind of ideas that you guys are coming with. Why? If you can summarize in a word or sentence, why do you think that a lot of leaders, including people like Kabila, overstay in power? If you can summarize it in one word or a sentence, does anyone want to?
International community.
Okay. Anything else?
Weaker institutions.
Can we do it one at a time? So if you want to speak, just stand up.
Say greed.
Greed?
Fear.
Fear. Yeah.
I think African politics is more of a business for leaders.
Business,
yeah.
Money. Yeah.
I think we also need to look at the colonial history. So because of the fact that it's like new money,
Yeah.
then there's this automatic greed that comes with it that African leaders don't know how to navigate.
Okay. So we had greed, post-colonial, neo-colonial relations. Yeah.
I think it's just a system that doesn't work for us. The system is easy for us to manipulate because it's not in line with our culture.
Okay. So it's really nice mix of ideas. Take one more at the back. Yes, sorry? Big mind syndrome. Okay. So kind of like ego in that as well. Okay, so also if we stay on the topic of Congo, Richard, you've also been quite active talking about the injustice facing in Congo. So what do you, I mean, related to what Francine says, how much do you believe, as also a politician, how much do you believe the international community has on the situation in Congo?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizing this event and for the invite. Yeah, I agree with what my colleague Florence just said. But I'm going to define a bit. First of all, I'm going to identify myself as someone who has worked so much regarding human rights in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Since 2010, I've been part and parcel of group Africa First, which has been organizing meetings in the House of Parliament. And we've been going there, attending with Congolese leaders here in UK. And the most successful one was the one which was held in Parliament, and Jeremy Corbyn chaired it. Africa First was there, Mother for Congolese was there, and UN was there. The resolution was passed to for international community to go and flush out M23. The report was done to UK government, UN, and other international organizations. And the resolution, when it was passed, that is when UN got involved and M23 was flushed out of Congo. Blaming international community, yes, they have a part to play. But from what I know, first of all, my family, I'm going to be personal. My family back home, I'm from Uganda. When Museveni was fighting to come to power, he was staying at our family house, my granddaddy's house. That's where I was staying. Even Paul Kagame of Rwanda, he was staying at my family's house. If you know the history of Rwanda, Fred Rejema, who first led a group which went to Rwanda, he was staying at our family. All top army officials in government of Uganda and Rwanda, they were all staying because the main barracks during that war, he was at our house. So I know these guys I'm talking about. Kabila grew up in Uganda. His dad was in Uganda. The problem why they are overstaying, I'm going to answer that question through Museveni's own statement when he was swearing in the first time when he came to power in Uganda in 1986. He said Africa's problem is not the people. No, he said Africa's problem in general, and Uganda in particular, is not the people, but leaders who overstay in power. Museveni has been in power for 31 years. Now he's answering his own what? Statement. Paul Kagame has no signs of living. And I'm telling you, I attend a lot of meetings, international community meetings, and but everybody knows that blaming international community is not gonna go and start bombing Kabila. No, international community is not gonna start bombing Kagame or Museveni. It's we Africans, and the power is in your own hands. Africans in diaspora, you are the power. You are the one to answer Africa's call. Why? You are exposed. You use social media to empower your fellow Africans back home. And every year, if you can still go back and talk to young people. Start the work right now. For me, I came to this country for studies. But that was 2004. But every year I made an effort to go back home. And I did not go back home to show off. But every year when I went back home, I had a project with young people, with my community. I started from my own family, whereby during, like I say, my granddad built a house and a church, donated it to our community. All my grandparents did that. So all that was bombed during the war. I made it sure that every time when I go back, either I do a project at school or church. So when time comes when you have to involve, people that will know that yes, you are the right person to deal with. And you are still young people, you have all the powers, you have the resources. We are the one to make calls, especially here in UK. Get involved here in politics of UK. Learn how to manage campaigns. Learn how to implement good governance. Because, for example, if you get involved in your local politics here in UK, for example, in your constituencies where you are coming from, you can stand as a councillor or you can get membership and you start getting involved. They will teach you how to run campaign, how to become a good leader. Get that knowledge so that it can be transferred back home when time is right.
So, sorry.
But to make it brief, I just want to say that the international community is partly to blame, but we Africans here and back home will have the powers to change.
What I gathered from the audience and what I think what Francine was trying to kind of touch on was that the international community more so is the remainder, the leftovers from post-colonialism, and the remnants of them kind of make it a bit harder to change the system. But I want to go to Jamie, also focuses on Uganda, so I was just wondering, in terms of the role of the international community, is it just down to people kind of getting involved with the diaspora, or is it more so something that the West need to really focus on, especially when it comes to Uganda?
Thank you, Lauren. Well, I think in Uganda's case, what we've seen over the last 31 years of President Museveni's time in power is that he's been able quite well to manipulate the international community to serve his own ends. So what Museveni has been able to do is to utilize Uganda's commitment to the war on terror, the US international commitment to that. So it was one of the very first countries to offer support to the war in Iraq, for example, and has actually followed that up with commitments in terms of Ugandans going to drive and to provide other services to US personnel to cover for the country's democratic deficiencies. So what you have in Uganda until recently is a kind of impasse between the US State Department and the US Development Agency, the US AID. Museveni's kind of balanced this commitment by saying, look, if you want Uganda to remain a stable place that you can use in the region to tackle the ongoing crises, say in Somalia, in South Sudan, and in other parts of the Great Lakes region, then it's important that you support Uganda's efforts in terms of the military support that's offered to AMISOM, for example, the peacekeeping mission in Somalia, and so forth. Therefore, he's been able to kind of position himself very cleverly with the international community, keeping them looking at that angle in particular and less concerned about his efforts in 2005, for example, to remove term limits through a constitutional referendum. And he's finding it a little bit more difficult to do that now, but it's certainly been a key strategy of his to keep the international community at arm's length.
Yeah. So,
can I add on that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I 100% I agree with Jamie what he just said. And all African dictators, they are so clean, they are so clever to manipulate international community. How? What he just said is using the war on terror in Somalia as a weapon for him to stay in power. Same as Kagame. When you look at Kagame, he's empowering women. Rwanda is the only country, is #1 in the world, whereby parliament has got more women, in the world. But when you look at it in the opposite side, Kagame is arresting every woman who come out to stand against him. Victoria, now the new lady, young lady, Diana, they're in prison. And those are the credible candidates who should take up the leadership, but they're in prison. And on the other hand, he's saying Rwanda is championing women's cause. And international community will jump on that to support him. When you look at Museveni, what he's doing, Museveni is the one funding the war in South Sudan. Last month I had a meeting in Manchester with government ministers and other international organizations. Uganda is being praised because Uganda is #1 for looking after refugees in the world. Because of refugees which came from South Sudan, we have 1.3 million in Uganda, and those from Congo. And the international community is praising him for that. Yet he's the one causing those wars in the region. The war in Democratic Republic of Congo is because of Museveni. The war in South Sudan is because of Museveni. So when you look at the region, even he attacked, at one point he attacked Kenya. Kenya is the most stable country in that region. But Museveni tried to attack it. So, and even all other leaders, dictators, they know how to manipulate international community by championing some causes which will give them support. On the other hand, they will be terrorizing their own people.
Can I just say something? I do have a problem when you say they manipulate international community. I don't like that word manipulating. I don't think they manipulate the international community. International community know what's going on. They know. Come on, they have satellites in that region. They can only see fast video. They know what's going on. The issue is the money. It's money. It's money. The issue is minerals. They know that they need. We had Mobutu. They killed Patrice Lumumba in 1961, and they posed Mobutu for 32 years. They need him. They wanted him because they want a puppet. Museveni and Kagame are puppets, and they are there to control the mineral in Congo. So they use them. They're going to get tired of them. They're going to throw them like a piece of paper, just like they did with Mobutu. That is the problem. They know, my colleague, they know what's going on. Definitely they do.
Can I want to go to Samira for a second to join us in this conversation. So, obviously, I read your article about the Dictator Handbook. I thought it was really funny. Everyone should go read it. And it's has a lot of satire in it, but also holds a lot of truth. And it kind of links into what the other panelists were saying. But there was one section where you said about blaming the West, about overstaying in power. So how do you find kind of the international, because a lot of these leaders, Mugabe, Museveni, they will adamantly say that they're standing against imperialism, and that's why they're kind of not following what the West wants. But then, like you said, they're wearing chunky Swiss watches and boots from Italy. Like it's kind of, in what ways are they really fighting against the kind of imperialism into the country? So how do you, hearing what other panelists have said, how do you kind of balance the international community side versus just plain on blaming the West for, the problems and overstaying in power?
Mercy, thank you for having me on. I think dictatorships are facilitated, and it's very much a group effort. So you'll have the international community, you'll have corporate organizations, which I don't think we talk about enough. You'll have regional organizations. So, for example, the East African community being silent on Burundi because he may pull his troops out of Somalia. So it's definitely, I don't think there's just one reason behind why these leaders stay in power or what facilitates them to stay in power. But I do think that there is a real paradox in terms of their relationship with the West, where it's, oh yeah, you know, I'm not going to listen to them because they cannot dictate when we have elections and term limits and putting this system upon us. It's like colonialism. But at the same time, when it's healthcare time and shopping time, they're here. When they want product, you know, when President Museveni's daughter, I think, gave birth in Germany, and and you're just kind of like the same Germany that if they spoke out and said you need to go, you'd be kicking up a drama about. But at the same time, I do agree with Francine that, especially in the case of the Congo, the international community like the status quo. They do. I just think that can't really be debated. I mean, I'm not saying that they went into Iraq, and I definitely think that was wrong, but it's just interesting where they do take action and where they don't. And I really also feel how former colonies, you also see, like, for example, Kenya's got stuff going on, election tomorrow, and the UK up there at the forefront making statements, whereas in the DRC, it's generally always the Belgians. Rwanda, the French still seem to be coming in. Often I think that you can see a pattern, or like Togo, the French have released a statement, you see a pattern between former colonialists and the countries they colonize, and when they're silent and when they'll make a statement, there is definitely something in that. And it does come down to money, pure and simple. And also, you know, we don't want to rock the boat. Like, okay, it's a bit messy there. And while I think that it is ultimately up to the people on the ground to come out, or the diaspora, something I've seen, state-sanctioned violence. Like, I don't know how many of you guys have been in tear gas. It is not a good look. Like, that is really terrorizing people is a real thing. And state-sanctioned violence is something I've seen in Uganda, in the DRC. There's a really amazing organization in the DRC, a group of activists called Lucha. And I kid you guys not, every other day they are tweeting saying 5 activists were arrested today, they're in jail, haven't heard from them, don't know when they're going to be out. There's a lot of power in that. And that power is reinforced by an international, the UN, staying silent because sovereignty, you know, there's nothing to hold these leaders to account. International Criminal Court, what can it do? What's it really ever done? So I think, yeah, I think that's my take.
Let's go to the audience for some comments on what's been said.
So this is directed to, is it James or Jamie? All right, to Jamie and whoever else has an answer for this. We've obviously looked at the international community, really focused on that. I don't know if you've researched this, but could you tell us anything that you might know about? Why is it then that in some countries like Uganda, Museveni still remains quite popular? If you look at the elections, NRM members of parliament a lot of times win their constituency seats. On top of that, I would say, obviously, Museveni has sold this narrative of times were really bad during the apartheid, and you know, I mean, the regime, and now, you know, things are great. But when we look at all these leaders, yeah, we can say international community, but at home, we still have a lot of people that support them. In Burundi, you've got Nkurunziza. He's got quite a lot of support from his ethnic group. Museveni, not just from his ethnic group. In Kenya, similarly, Uhuru has 50% of the country. So, you know, I think there is a focus outside just the international community. Maybe you could make a comment on that.
Well, can we take one more question and then we'll answer both of them and do it like rounds or two? Let's go for you.
Hi, Samira spoke a bit about regional pressure, and I'm interested to see how this could be mobilized in the future. For example, in West Africa, ECOWAS was very effective in kind of shutting down what was going on in the Gambia, and those individual leaders are all problematic. Some of them have like extensive human rights abuses, but when it came down to it, they were able to kind of like calm down that situation. How can we replicate this in the future?
Yeah. So the panelists want to answer.
Yeah. Well, I can give both of them a go, because I think it's good to make that point about what's been happening in Gambia as a positive example, because I think there's two trends really that we're talking about here. There's a trend of, particularly in the Great Lakes regions, of rulers wanting to overstay their welcome. We've got Nkurunziza, Museveni, Kagame, Kabila, who have all tried to change term limits in their various ways to extend their time in power. And if we flip it over to West Africa, what we've seen actually in the last 20, 30 years is that there's been a lot greater adherence to term limits. So in Nigeria, you've had a transfer of power between two parties. In Ghana, you've had several. You've had term limits being respected currently in Liberia, because Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's standing down. You have term limits that are going to be respected in Sierra Leone and have been in the past. And in Gambia, of course, you had this example of ECOWAS, along with Senegal, providing kind of external pressure. And I think it is interesting to see what it is that brought ECOWAS's attention to the Gambia. There was a lot of talk that Jammeh wasn't very popular within the regional body, and that perhaps he didn't have enough friends to kind of ride it out. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Togo at the moment, there's not any pressure or statement being put out there by ECOWAS, despite a kind of similar, I mean, it's obviously not an election, but there's a campaign there to try and prevent the current leader staying in power beyond the next term. So I think it's really interesting to also kind of realize that there are some positive examples of finding ways to remove leaders from power, and looking at how they've been able to do that is really important, as well as criticizing those who don't. I mean, how is it that places like Nigeria, which is not necessarily a bastion of perfect democracy, how is it able to enforce these kinds of limits in the last 20 years vis-a-vis somewhere like the DRC or Uganda, for example? And to come to the gentleman's point about popularity, I think it's fair to say that Museveni does have still a strong support base, particularly in rural areas. That's undeniably true. I think there's a number of reasons why it's proved very difficult to, it's difficult as an opposition to operate in the space that exists in Uganda. There's a wide range of legislation that makes it very difficult for the FDC. Things like the Public Order Management Act, which bans meetings of 3 or more people. The cost of getting into politics is very high for politicians. I think there's a lack of awareness, perhaps, the further down the chain you go. And you have to understand, I think, in Uganda's context, the legacy of what's broadly called like the no-party movement system. So after Museveni took over in 1986, between 1986 and 1995, before the constitution was established, there was a 10-year period almost where Uganda had no political parties. Everyone operated under the no-party system. And Uganda built a kind of strong network of local government organizations. They have 5 tiers of local council in addition to politicians, MPs, and so forth. And that network has become almost symbiotic with the NRM, the National Resistance Movement, which is Museveni's party. And it's very difficult in some places to differentiate between the state and the party. And so that means it becomes very difficult for opposition to actually get their chance to speak and get their voice across. Now, I think it's probably fair to say that in the 2016 election, when Kizza Besigye got about, I think it was 36% of the vote, he claimed, that it was rigged, that perhaps he would have not been able to get 50%, even if it had been free and fair, in that particular vote. But you also then have to think about the context which that vote is taking place in, and whether if there was a freer environment that might be more open to people voting for change.
I'm going to start with the topic of Uganda. Rigging is not just stuffing ballot boxes. I think a big form of rigging an election is limiting the opposition to ensure they cannot become a credible force. And when I interviewed Dr. Besigye last year, he said we've just not been allowed to build a party which can actually come forward and say these are the things we can offer, because Well, he's in jail half the time. He was in jail yesterday. Like, he's out on bail today. Is he back at? Well, there you go, guys. You know, like there's only so much you can do from that space. And I think the interesting thing with Uganda will be when the lead up to the election was happening. A lot of people were saying the people you're seeing on social media, the youth, are, you know, FTC. We want Museveni gone. They are not the people in the villages and the kafundas sitting there, like they are not on Twitter, and those are the people that are going to vote. It will be interesting to see in the next few years if the system changes as, you know, the youth population matures and all the rest of it. But I definitely do think that Mr. Museveni has been able to stay in power largely because he is the state, and the state is him. That, you know, it's simple as that. So I'm inclined to agree with Jamie. As for regional organizations, a couple of weeks ago, Jacob Zuma met with President Kabila, representing SADC. We are yet to hear what happened at that meeting. Like, they have not said anything. I don't even think there was a photo op. I don't, you know, was there one? Well, I didn't even see that. And I do think that, you know, President Jammeh wasn't besties with everyone else in ECOWAS, and that worked against him. It's very pick and choose on who's going to take action on what. So generally, no one's done anything about Burundi. Nothing, you know. And also, I believe in some cases it can be a bit of a pots and kettles situation. So President Museveni came forward on behalf of the East African community and decided, you know, he's going to have a little chat with President Nkurunziza. Sorry, I'm all shaky, yeah. He's just going to be like, brother, you kidding with me? Like, you've been in there 30 years, take several seats and talk to me in a few, you know, a few 10 minutes later. So I just think the biggest issue in terms of anyone intervening is, one, is it convenient? Two, is it going to be messy and spill into our borders? And three, sovereignty. Like, that thing is thrown around so much, which is why there's a lot of regional organizations that just stay quiet because it's just too much work. You know, the EAC have been going on sending mediators to Burundi, nothing's happened. And now, you know, you're seeing things in terms of Tanzania with Magufuli. You know, some people argue there's a bit of a dictatorship thing coming out of there. So who are you going to send? Like, you know, what place do these regional organizations have to be like, actually we need to intervene in there? Ignorance is bliss, guys, ultimately.
And on the topic of sovereignty, I wanted to actually go to Richard, because I know you had a recent petition to get the UK to help bring democracy. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about that and what you believe the UK can do without kind of compromising the sovereignty of Uganda.
Thank you. What can UK do to intervene? I think there is nothing much. It's about Ugandans getting together and come up with the right plan to change the regime and show leadership. When we do that, then UK government can come behind us. I can say this, I have a lot of meetings with UK government officials who are working on the Uganda issue, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or Great Lakes region. And they are all positive behind us. But what they want to see is a team of leaders saying this is the government, this is what we want once we change the government of Uganda. But what I see normally, for example, when we go there in parliament with either a group of leaders from Congo or from Uganda, is blaming West. Oh, you are the one keeping Kabila here because you are taking minerals. But we don't show leadership to say that this is what we want to see. Our government is going to run, and this is what we put on the table. Be behind us so that we can have change. We should shift from blaming international community to being practical. We should give...
We did it.
2011.
We definitely did it. I'm sorry, we did it in 2011. We actually choose a Chen Tshisekedi, but the refugee Chen Tshisekedi say he's called Lumumba mine. We did it. We did it in 1992. We did it in Democratic Republic of Congo. We did it.
Let me go to the audience because I had a lot of reactions. Let's go to over here, the guy in the middle.
Yes, I just want to ask the honourable gentleman that what really prompted him to actually give UK as an example to build democracy to Uganda. Then secondly, the point that we shouldn't be blaming the West. You know, how can you look at the future when you're forgetting about the past? You can't just look ahead, forgetting about the past. You know, they are partly to be blamed. There is something we call like this hygiene war. I think a lot of Africans we need. You know, like we talked that earlier on, we started really well until now that you're asking us, basically Ugandans, to give to follow the UK as an example. You know, if you look back here, if you look at the word like democracy itself, you might say the UK is not democratic because there is no like fixed term of any prime minister. If that happens to an African country, you might say they are dictatorship, right? They are not. It's not a two-term. You can rule as long as you want, and if people like you can be in power. So how can we follow the UK example to take like this so-called democracy for Uganda?
And let's take another question. Yeah.
Hi. So I just wanted to know your opinions on the role of the media in situations like this. Like, what can they do to help, or what do they do that distracts from situations like this?
Oh, can we hold that question? Can we have another question about... Sorry? We'll hold it. We'll definitely answer it. Can we have another question kind of relating to... No, Grace Scott.
Okay. Thank you. So my question is about examples, for example, like the case of Liberia. Our president is standing down and election is happening. And our former president, Charles Taylor, who's now in Hague, is serving prison. Do you think it's about protection of these leaders who have said that they maybe don't want to be accountable, and if after they've left power, they might be held liable or sent to the ICC, you know, all those kind of...
Can I add something on that?
Yeah, sure.
It's quite important. If you look at the biggest achievement of Mandela when he came to power, he went to say that we are going to have what we call reconciliation. That was very important to make South Africa what it is today. In Africa, we're having some serious issues there because we do not have an institution to protect people who are in power. When they leave power, what happened to them? I think you have touched on that. I was in the ICC when your president was in trial. We are having a serious problem in the West. There are what you call most important interests of a country. If a president is in power and they've done something wrong, it's better to forgive them and give them some humility so they could leave power. Should we maybe try that? If you can answer that question.
Yeah. So should we go back to Richard? Do you want to?
Yeah. To answer the gentleman here, that is a good question. What I was trying to bring out is instead of blaming or what, we should work in partnership with international community. How? Let us show our leadership.
It's not a balance of power.
Yeah? Yes, it is a balance of power.
There isn't a
But
balance of power.
let me finish this. It is too much. International community doesn't mean only governance, but it means a lot of, like Samira said, there is cooperation, there is what? There is business. Whereby these people, they want to know that if you take power, are their businesses protected? Like what the gentleman just said, those in power at the moment, for example, take example of Uganda. When Museveni came to power, all previous leaders, they were in exile, and they died in exile. So he knows that it's going to be the same case when he leaves power. What he wants now, doesn't want to hear people saying that the moment you are out, we're going to chop off your head or we're going to put you in prison. But he wants to know that if he leaves power, he will be staying in the country safely. We can have a reconciliation program, like what the gentleman said. that is the initiative which can change Africa. But the moment if we are outside looking to go into power and we are speaking fire, those people in power, they are also speaking fire that we are not living. For example, take an example of Mugabe. Mugabe, you can't tell me that he's leading in that country, but it's people around him. Because they know if he goes, they are finished. It's not just one person. When you look at Uganda, it's not Museveni alone, but the people around him, they're the ones protecting what they have. But the moment they know that if they are out of power, they are safe, they are going to stay in the country, things will stay, we'll have our conciliation program, and life will go on. Trust me, things will change. We just need to change the way we approach politics.
It's not the case in Congo?
Let me talk about when you go on Congo, like I said, one point we went with you in Parliament to meet with a group of Congolese. But all the people we went with, they are leaders, Congolese leaders here in UK. But they were just speaking fire. They did not put something on the table to say, look, we want your support on this. This is the type of governance we want to bring to Congo. So support us behind this. But for them, they're just, you guys were the one keeping Kabila there, because you are stealing. So there is confrontation. We don't need confrontation.
We need to heal ourselves. We need to be we need to talk. We need to be equal. I don't believe in supremacy. We have to be equal. It's our land. I don't really have a word in what's going on in the my grandmother in the northern part of Africa, south of Africa, northwest, we're all part of Africa. They don't have any say in what's going on in Europe. So why they must have a say in what's going on in Africa? It doesn't make sense. We all are equal. The problem is a supremacy. There's a group of people decided to control the world, and we can't have that look. In 2000, Laurent Desire Kabila, the father of the President Joseph Kabila, Laurent Desire Kabila, when he got into power, he said, we want to control our mineral. You should come and work with us. They didn't like it. They killed him. They cut Lumumba into pieces because of something like that. The problem is they want us to be, okay, we put you there, Francine. You have to do this and this and that. And that's how it's not working. It's not working. We have to work as a partner. But the international community doesn't want a specific, like in Congo, it's a multinational. Because the multinational, you call it corporate. In Congo, we have a lot of them control mine. What they do, they support the militias, they're creating war in the eastern part of Congo. So as soon as the war broke out, people run away from villages, and they will take the land and then control the mine. That's what they do. They can get access to mineral for free. That's why I said at the beginning, it's all about money. It's always been money. It's money. So we can't just, if you go, you imagine it's your land. It's your land, and someone else will come every single day and telling you have to do this, we want this and that. They destroy Libya. Libya is the capital of ISIS now. Libya used to be a peaceful country. So I know that Gaddafi wasn't sent, but don't tell me Bush is sent or Tony Blair. So it doesn't make sense for me. We all have to come together, my brother. We have to talk about this. We are equal. We have to talk about this. Like, look, you work with me as you are coming as an investor, as a partner. Come and work with us. We don't eat diamond. You have diamond, gold in Uganda. We share borders. We have gold. And now they found oil. We don't eat all that. Come and work with us, but don't impose me what to do. It doesn't make sense. I get nervous, like I study in this country, and I'm always think about, like, imagine one day if I'm a president in Congo, and then my colleague, my classmate, will start imposing me what to do. It's crazy. It is madness. We have to come together as one.
That's amazing. But I noticed a lot of
That's something on this question of immunities. I think it's a very important point that the gentleman raised. And if you look at what happened in the Gambia after Jammeh lost the election, he initially actually chose to accept those election results. If you remember, he went on television and said that he was happy with what happened. He only started changing his mind when people in the incoming government started talking about investigations into what had happened in his regime. So it's a difficult kind of situation to try and navigate around, and Richard's right in saying it's not just the person at the top that's going to be in the firing line, as it were, but those around him. So people that have been in security forces in the Gambia, for example, for a long time, they're also going to be looking around thinking, well, my protector is gone now, I'm going to be put in jail for a very long time. And I'm not saying that they should get away for their crimes like that without being punished, but it is a question that people have to grapple with to understand, is this a sacrifice worth making for the peace and development moving forward of the country, or should we really try and push these people out and chase them as far as we can? I mean, what's happened in the Gambia is that Jammeh was kind of the negotiated exile, essentially, and he was able to go off with his Rolls Royces and various amounts of money to Equatorial Guinea, to another dictatorship on the continent. But the importance of kind of understanding I think the winner-takes-all aspect of politics in many African countries is really fundamental to understanding why people end up clinging to power. Because it's not just one person we're talking about in a lot of these cases. It's a system. It's a whole network of people that are reliant on this system continuing. And if it starts not continuing, then they're also going to find themselves out of a job, out of a social network, out of an ability to influence. And so, there needs to be ways around thinking about how we can develop, or Africa can develop itself, institutions that enable this kind of winner-takes-all mentality to be gradually eroded over time.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I'm quite cynical, and I just think power and money is addictive and seductive. So I still think there's a lot of leaders that you could say, we'll give you your exit, go do your thing, just let us have our democracy. And I don't think they would take it. I really don't. And I do agree that it is also the people around them. So
can some take it? Some.
Possibly,
Right.
but I'm sorry to say I don't think Mr. Mugabe is going to be like, bye. Like, I just don't think he is, because it's never enough, is it? I mean, I'm of the thing in terms of, I'd love to do like a psychological study on dictators, because I think that hunger, that ego of, I want, okay, I've got $5 billion and I can leave, but why don't I stay and make more money off the resources and have 10 billion? And yeah, so that's just my take on it.
And I want to kind of take all of that and channel it, because remember philosopher wrote about politics, also kind of touched upon what Jamie was saying about there are institutional reasons post-colonialism. There were institutions put in place, and no matter what leader comes in, they have to grapple with what's already left, the whole network, and there's only so much they can do. And I think that also links in with structuralism, the idea that there is, a structure and you're pushing it, and then it's pushing back at you, and there's only so much you can do. But then I want to go back to what Samira was saying about agency, about some people really just are power hungry, and I think even Obama was talking, when he made his speech, and he was talking about the lust and seduction of power in African leaders, which is a bit generalized, but we know who he's talking about. And I want to maybe open that to the floor. Is it to do with kind of the structures in place, or is it to do with just a lust for power? Who wants to answer that? Stripe jumper.
Mine is tacking on to what Jamie said, back to West Africa. In Ghana, one of the ways they're thinking about tackling the structural problem and the problem of winner-takes-all syndrome is devolution, more regional and local elections to kind of disperse power from the centre. and limit nepotism. And I know that this could seem very, very far away in some countries where it's already difficult to hold elections, but could you see this as in the future being something used to tackle that problem?
And let's take another one. Someone hasn't spoken.
I'm going to make a really controversial point here,
Sure.
so no one hate me. So I've been listening really intently, and I think the point made around people fearing what they're going to lose when they leave office is a really great point, and if I take anything from me today, I think that's a brilliant point. But I also think that, especially speaking as a West African, there is a cultural element to this that I think has been missed in some respects. And what I mean by that is, for example, in Nigeria, the way people are perceived in society, if they are, as Nigerians would describe, they would say someone who's an aga, he's very successful, has reached a certain level of power. Do you think that culture plays a big part as to why there is this deep desire to have absolutism of staying in power? Because I think it's something that whenever I listen to people talk about African politics, it's always skirted over. And especially how children are brought up around sort of blind obedience. I think there's so much interwoven with culture that is missed, and possibly could be the reason for some of the bigger challenges.
Yeah. So I want to add to that point as well. There are quite a few academics. I know last year I read about a few, which I personally don't agree with that argument, but the arguments that they were putting forward was that it is a cultural. There is why democracy doesn't work in a lot of African countries, because it's cultural, because people don't listen to each other in Africa, and people that's kind of like a really...
so it's not so much they don't listen to each other.
But it's kind of like...
I would say it's the opposite. I would say actually it's that they listen to power too much.
This is what the academics are saying. This is not my personal opinion. But there are academics that say, like Africans, there's a culture of not listening to each other, obedience, and that kind of doesn't really coincide with democracy. But because there are 2 points, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, if I could. I think there's many questions I could ask, and I'm a bit like Francine, I'm getting a little bit restless with this conversation, to be fair. First of all, I just wanted to find out what you consider to be white supremacy, and whether or not that can sit with Pan-Africanism. So that's one question. White supremacy versus Pan-Africanism, because I'm not sure where you sit, which side, because there is a side. And to my young brother there, if you could look into Ma'at, M-A-A-T, and when you do that, you'll actually understand that Ma'at is a balance of the male and the female. There is no life without the female. And so Africa had, 6 in the Ma'atan principle, which basically means that without the one, the female entity, the male entity cannot exist. So we had that balance. We had the Council of Elders. We had kingdoms like Congo, Axum. Again, brother mentioned, the Bantu lands in South Africa. So there was a shift. I've lived in Ethiopia for a number of years, and there's an amazing kingdom. The kingdoms of Benin. We have some of the bronzes right now at the Royal Museum and the British Museum. You can see them today. Okay, so my point being is there was a disconnect. Yeah, we understand what that was. So I would ask, when Uganda was gained its independence, so that's another question. When did Congo gain her independence? That's another question. And when did the UK, Great Britain, as it moves towards Brexit, gain its independence? And how was that achieved? How was that achieved? Yeah. So a few questions. There are many, but just.
I do want to kind of pass that over. Definitely, there is an obvious, and it kind of goes without saying, white supremacy does play a big role in the dynamics.
Do we know what it is?
Well, let's ask. So. Let's go to Richard, because there are a few directed at you, and then we can pass it on.
Good question. White supremacy, to me, I think, well, it is there, but I think Africans or blacks, we are promoting it. We have the power, like I say, to change our world by ourselves. That's why I started by saying that don't expect international community or UK to come and bomb your leadership out of power, your government out of power. It's we, people from that particular country, working together to get rid of that dictatorship. But the more we call for international community to come and help us to do that, that is white supremacy, if I can say. Look at Burkina Faso. Young people, they came out. They said enough is enough. They changed the regime. Look at Tunisia. Young people came out. They took off the regime. They managed it. That is what that is the power I'm calling for. People having their, people power. But the moment you sit back and say, international community, UK should come, they are the one keeping that person, you are the one calling for supremacy. End of slavery. It was not the white people who said, no, we have to stop this. It was slaves themselves who started rebelling against what? They started banning sugarcane plantations. That's how slavery stopped, ended. And the top man came, Lincoln, and said, oh, I'm the one who ended it. But it was people themselves who fought for it. That is what I call supremacy of our own. We have to create that, not always calling. The moment we start calling for international community or UK government or America, we are calling for white supremacy.
Who's doing that? Who's doing that? Who's calling for that?
Let's settle down, guys. Let's ask the other question. Let's get the panelists to answer.
For me, white supremacy is, first of all, I see white supremacy. I come from a French country. I know Congo, we don't use franc CFA. But do you know there's 14 countries in Africa still use colonial money, franc CFA? So the money, they make the money in France, actually. That's a symbol of France, Africa. That's a symbol of white supremacy. And then for me, white supremacy is language. I know we need to learn different languages, but imposing us languages. We sing in Cameroon between the French side and the English side. You can see the white supremacy fighting. Because the English feeling they are, they don't care about them, the French as well. So they have they are one people, but the white supremacy divide them because of English and French. So for me, language is a symbol. In our school, I was born in Congo, I have to learn French. And I know a lot of people, all Congolese, you have to learn French to get a better job. That's not our language. That's white supremacy. They strip us out of our what can I say? What is ours? They took our language and then they imposed it. It's okay to learn different languages, but for me, we need to start promoting our languages. This is why people who know me on Facebook, you should follow me. I'm cool. So I have to speak in English as well because of my English. I've got a lot of English friends who they actually need to understand what I'm saying, but I always have to speak Lingala Swahili, put in Lingala Swahili, Kikongo, Chiluba. That's my ancestors' language. We need to come to that thing. For me, that's a white supremacy. And the issue of money, franc CFA, how come people are using that money in this 21st century? And then the former president, France president called Jacques Chirac, he said, that statement broke my heart. He said that France, without Africa, France won't be the France we know. He said we should thank Africa because all the money we have in the bank will come from Africa. And that statement is very terrible. That's white supremacy for me.
Yeah, so let's refine it back to leaders overstaying, and let's refine it with the idea of white supremacy, the dynamics between the North and South that were embedded with colonialism and post-colonialism, if you believe that's a thing, which I do. So let's refine that and talk about how that plays in, the dynamics, when you go to meetings and having, what Francine was saying, Europeans or whites here, Africans here, but Rich was saying it's more like it should be like this, it's more Africans not united together. So let's pass it down. Samira or Jamie want to talk about
Jamie's like jumping to answer this.
Jamie, I saw Jamie, I was like, hey.
You know what? My other job is, you guys may have heard of an organisation called Media Diversified, at Writers of Colour. So we publish a lot of stuff around this, and I wrote an article, Colonial Mentality in East Africa, and it really was looking at, so having lived in Uganda, Kenya, and travelled through Rwanda and certain parts of the DRC, India, which obviously not being part of Africa, but this thing of, in Uganda for example, I would often be considered white, and going into the bank and there being a queue of Ugandans, and because I'm considered white, being put to the front of the queue. And I think that plays in at so many different levels. And so definitely for me, white supremacy does play a part, also because we do, regardless of whether these guys are staying in power or not, if the white foreign investors, white companies pulled out of a lot of these countries, the economy would collapse. Talk about South Africa, cappuccino economy is what they call it, the whites at the top. So I do think that it plays a part. I hope that's not offensive. It's a bit late now. But, yeah, I just think we cannot, I don't think race can be separated from any aspect of anything in the world. And it plays a part here as well. And I had something else to say, which I'm sure was really intelligent, but it's gone out my head.
Jamie, you want to finish up on that?
I didn't prepare any notes to talk about white supremacy tonight, I'm afraid. So I think I'd actually like to answer this gentleman's question about, I mean, I can't believe I'm saying I'd rather answer a question about African culture, but I think it's actually a really interesting point. And there are a number of factors outside of the formal political space that I think are really important. And I point in the direction of a publication that we did a couple of years ago about who really governs urban Ghana, that looks at the kind of dynamics beneath the formal democratic system for how power really operates and exists within the city, in Accra particularly. But I think it applies to a number of other contexts. And there's another subject that I'm personally quite interested in, and this kind of reinforcing these ideas of big men syndrome, if you want to call it, is the kind of rise in power of Pentecostal pastors across the continent. Now I'm wading into very dangerous territory, so I'm going to stop before I say this. But I think that you see the arguably they are providing in many cases for payment, for paying your tithes, you're actually getting more than what the state is giving you for what you're getting in taxes. And the influence that they can have, say, on, if you look at some of the kind of senior political figures across the continent, Nigeria's vice president, Osinbajo, is a Pentecostal pastor.
He's a good man.
I'm not disputing the veracity of their thought. I'm just saying that it's an important thing to consider when we're looking at these, who has influence in politics in various countries. Don't forget about these guys. They have huge amounts of money. There's some very interesting research done around the Nigerian election in 2015 about the amount of money that Pentecostal pastors were contributing to election campaigns. I think it's something that we need to think about when we're talking about this whole kind of dynamic, and the point about it not just being one individual, but a group of individuals who are invested in this particular person or group of people staying in power.
But Jamie, I'm sorry, but the white supremacy question, like you're working on this topic where you can't have a conversation about white supremacy. It's like it's kind of concerning.
Wow. I'm happy to, the work that we do, and this is why I'm kind of putting my voice to the side, is that the work that I do at RI is very much to promote and put African voices to the fore of conversations. What we're trying to do is to provide the platform for them to do that, and to really focus, get their work out into a wider attention. So perhaps that's why I'm stepping back from the conversations, because I feel that that's the kind of role of our institute, or the idea of our institute, is to really push forward discussion on this from Africans themselves. I think that it is important that, if we see things around what's happened with ECOWAS, for example, and we talk about solutions coming from within the continent as well as external, are just as important.
So can I open it to the floor because of yeah, so we want to open it to the floor because
just one point about what as young people, for me what I'm calling for, as young people, we should look at ways of working as partners, other than having that divide of white supremacy or black. We should look at ways, for example, Africa House will promote trade between UK and Africa. And our role is to see that we stop aid and we promote trade instead of aid, so that we can have that partnership. Other than being given handout, we should be given handout, because trade, you work as partners. Those are the areas we should look at, other than having that difference.
So the young lady who asked the question about devolution, that wasn't answered. I just wanted to say Kenya has started a system of devolution, and it's going to take time to be able to gauge how well that goes and then whether it would work in other places. In contrast, Gabon are trying to pass changes to the constitution which would see more power with the president. They're really pushing for it. Like, if you're the head of intelligence and the head of security, you'll have to swear an oath to the president. So you're kind of seeing two different sides to it, but I think it's still too early to tell what kind of impact it will have, because by all intents and purposes there's devolution in Kenya, but what they seem to be doing is the nurses are on strike. That's for the governors and the devolution system to deal with. Nurses have been on strike for almost 4 months now, but yet the power is very much in the presidency, so it's kind of pick and choose. So I just,
Yeah, so your hand's been up for a while, so...
I'm going to start on this one. I'm going to start by saying, bonjour, hello, and bonjour. Okay, my question really starts off with is that I'm in a sort of student of political science, and now I was kind of sad because we didn't quite grasp some of the sort of political sort of macro themes that play here, so I've highlighted them essentially. So one of them being that, coming from Richard's point, was how external actors are at play in the context of Uganda, Rwanda, and how they act as both the creators of instability in the DRC, and also they are also the mirage or the face for sort of regional interference to promote stability. That's paradoxical in itself. Now, for some people who talk about how Africa has bad leaders and stuff like that, this is more of a, I can't think of the right word in English, but it's more of a facade in the sense that we have to take into context the historical account of the DRC. The DRC hasn't been independent for over, it's only been independent not over more than 70 years. And so there are countries in the West who draw parallels in today, for example the US, who are having enormous, profound issues in sorting out the society issue, for example in African Americans themselves, it being an established democracy. Now my context here is Africa is that the context of Congo itself, it has titans. Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, there's people who actually fought and kind of challenged or championed certain ideas, but they've been exterminated by the West. Now my issue here is essentially now, when we're looking at international actors, we have to look at who's actually driving these, because I have a theory essentially. So we'll talk about how there's not much international recognition, but the issue is who's actually lobbying them. So for those that don't know, there's a company known as Glencoe. Essentially, it has enormous interest, strategic values as they call it, in the DRC, and one of the provinces known as Katanga, which is one of the most natural resources province in the world. Now, it itself, we're distracted by the fact that Kabila is making over a few billions here by kind of extorting the government and such like that. That's a distraction in itself, because we shift our focus to Kabila instead of focus on Glencoe, where it has a policy which is illegal in itself, known as transfer pricing, where you make extortionate or astronomical amounts of figures in the context of billions, and it's based in Geneva. They're making that much money there, which essentially is what's robbing the DRC today. I want you guys to come and open the question to the floor. Thank you very much.
And I just want to add to that money question, because, like you say, Glencoe is a big extortionate, and it's actually almost part of how the state is set up. It's part of it, because they put one of their people in the treasury and the money goes missing, and then,
London is another one, South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Miners.
So I do want to touch on that, but that's absolutely, I mean, that's absolutely Kabila's family, and him kind of putting those people, putting his family in his power. But I want to just go to
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that particular point as well. And bring back the discussion that we had with the international community. It seems to be, the gist here seems to be that the international community seems to intervene in Africa when it has a particular interest to play in that. But I just want to flip the question the other way around as well, and then following up on that from the point that Barber made, is that what can we do here to ensure that the Africa doesn't suffer as much as it's suffering right now? But that essentially I'm trying to ask is, what could we do? Because the system that's in play, the reason why the international community is interfering within the African system is because they have something to sell back to us here in the West. We maintain that system through our consumers' nature, the things we read, or buy all the clothes we buy, all the items we buy as well. So what can we do more here to put pressure on these international bodies or these massive conglomerates, or the Apples or the Googles or the Klingons as well, to ensure that their interference within Africa is more positive and helping Africa as well?
I'm going to actually partially answer that because it links to the society that we run here. There's a campaign that we're going to be launching. I will send everyone who wants an email, called Conflict Free Campus. So what it's about is bringing more transparency to the supply chain system. And a lot of universities, not necessarily implicitly, but they buy supplies from companies that don't have good transparency, that the minerals can be traced back to the east of Congo. So the Conflict Free Campus campaign has been going on for a number of years, and a lot of, I mean, it's really widespread in America, but in the UK it's not really as kind of widespread in universities. It's only Edinburgh, I think. Edinburgh's the only university that's conflict free. So we're trying to bring that into SOAS. And if I had our position papers, I would have bought them. I don't know why I didn't put them. But that is something that you can take on yourself, is to be a aware consumer, to make sure there's companies, for example, like Intel, who have changed their policies for the better and are making sure that it's more transparent and they're not sourcing from conflict mines in Congo. So there's a lot, I mean, I feel like sometimes we feel a bit powerless and feel like it's a big system that we can't, you know, obviously, like, change never happens overnight in any circumstances, in any change that we see, like in the world or in history, it never happens overnight. But when we do things like be aware consumers, in the capitalist system that we live in, it's all about supply and demand. So if we are demanding that we have more transparency, they will supply that. It's all about money at the end of the day. So just being an aware consumer. Sorry, I answered that.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
If you see what is happening in America, for instance, issues dealing with Israelis and so on, you're having these Israeli pressure groups going to influence the government there. We can have here in the West or in Europe what we call Africa pressure group, which could be possibly talking on behalf of of Africans. Because we have power here. We have power because we went to school. You went to some of the best. We have some of the best universities in the world. We have power. We can really have something which can talk on behalf of people in Africa, like what the Israelis are doing in America, for instance. We can have like Africa pressure group. For instance, if you're having a policy which could be affecting the interests of Africa, like for instance the ICC, we seem to be prosecuting only African leaders, then there is a consequence for that. It means people, when they're in power, they want to die there, because even in power, they are going to end up in the ICC. So both things are very important. We need to be looking at policies which are influencing the policies in Africa, and we can really influence our people here, our governments here. Some of us have lost our nationalities, but we can really influence what they are doing here, which can impact the lives of people in Africa.
Yeah,
thank you.
so thank you for that. Obviously, it goes without saying this is not just an African problem. I mean, this happens with a lot of ex-colonies and just leaders all over the world. But you know, as African, me as African, I want change in my country. I want change in my continent. So I feel like a lot of that's what unites us all. But I do want to steer back to the conversation because I know it's a bit of a concern, and I'm going to look at. Just touch a little bit. I mean, we've spoken about money, and I feel like that kind of goes without saying. But I do want to focus a little bit on the legitimacy, because I think that's a really interesting point to follow up on. So in countries like Rwanda, where Kagame has so much regional support, and like you said, even to do with, and internationally as well, looking at, for example, some of people who advocate good governance, I'm not sure about how you feel, obviously I shouldn't even know how you feel about Kagame, but you know, a lot of them are like, yeah, he puts a lot of women in parliament, you know, he's so forward, and it's like how many, you know, women have died in the Eastern Congo because of his policy at the same time, and does that stop him from being a dictator? I'm not sure. But lots of Rwandans, in Rwanda, there's huge support for him, and even in countries where, and obviously that's also because, you know, a lot of Rwandans don't want another genocide, they want stability, and a lot of Rwanda has improved, you know, healthcare, housing, in terms of the street and everything. Like, it's just a very clean place to be. It's very improved, and a lot of commentators talk about it being like the African Singapore. But even in countries where there's, I mean, okay, so we talk about what happens there in terms of sovereignty, if there's a widespread support, and if, you know, he's being voted in, what do we do then? Or what happens then? But also in countries where maybe there's not widespread support in the same way, but people just want stability. They don't want another transitional government that's going to be worse than the last. That does, in some way, give them legitimacy. So how do we grapple with leaders staying, like, overstaying in power, but they have some kind of legitimacy whether we think it's right or wrong? So does anyone want to start that, Smith?
Have any of you guys ever tweeted anything considered slightly touching upon being anti-Kagame? Anyone ever done that? The minute you do that, I mean, Rwandans will come for you like nobody's business.
I have experienced that.
Well, yeah, like, you know, because there are a lot of people there who do support him. Now, whether that's what we're seeing because those that don't are generally either in exile, oppressed, whatever, I don't, which I assume is the case. But he does have a lot of support, and when that takes place, I mean, I don't. What was his recent election win? 90, something amazing. I think that plays a part in why there is only so much you can say. And also, if you look at the rest of the continent in general, I know people in other parts of the continent who also think Kagame is amazing because of what he's done, and that links to the whole thing of just not wanting more violence or whatever. There's a book called, it's on the Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye, and it's by a guy called Daniel Kalinaki, and he refers to kind of Uganda's unending cycles of violence. And kind of there's a suggestion in there that a lot of the times leaders are kept in power because when a country has had history of violence and bloodshed, you just don't want to go back to it. And I think there's a valid point in that. You know, PTSD is a part of a lot of societies. So this is probably, in my experience, the most tricky one to grapple with, because what you're generally facing is a system whereby people on the surface seem happy, institutions seem to work. There's always, something always happens in the end. So Mugabe, Museveni, darlings of the West, till they won. So it'd be interesting to see with Kagame, you know, and already you can see he's no longer the darling of the West. They're all having a bit of an issue with him. But 5 years ago, you know, everyone, they all wanted Kagames all over the continent. It's a really, really tricky one because you can just throw in that it's the will of the people. They won an election, what more do you want? And it comes back to my point earlier that it's easy to win an election when you oppress those that may stand against you. It's really, really straightforward. So I don't really have an answer for it, but I do think that it's a huge, huge issue.
And to add to that, this is to Richard and Jamie. actually a professor at SOAS, Stephen Chan, well known. He wrote a book recently about why Mugabe won, and he said that it's because he had, well, to summarize the whole book, because he had a lot of support, and he had a lot of, you know, his conclusion isn't that Mugabe is great, he has so much support, but his conclusion was that the facts showed that a lot of people voted for Mugabe. So I wonder if any of you two would want to kind of add to what Samira was saying in terms of that.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I don't know what measurement they use to know that Mugabe or Kagame, they are popular, because what? Media. In Rwanda, there is no press can issue anything against Kagame or talk anything negative about Kagame. Like you said on Twitter, Facebook, nobody in Rwanda can tweet or write anything against Kagame. What else can I say? So, if there is no voice in the country against that particular person, and even those credible leaders who are trying to come out, you put them in prison. Like I said, Diana and Victoria. Those are two great women who came out, who could, you know, be the next president. They are in prison now. It would be difficult in that situation to say, oh, the man is popular. For example, I've never attended any meeting here in UK. And you find someone now praising Kagame like they used to before. Even business community, they don't. They know they are doing business there, but they are worried. They know Rwanda is not going to be stable for the next 5-10 years. Things are going to change. They are about to change. Even leaders, when you talk behind closed doors, they are against Kagame, but they cannot come out in public because they are still doing business. They are, there is no voice against him in the country. When you look at the last concluded elections, he put up his own people to stand as, candidates against him, but he's the one who chose them to stand. Those who are credible, who should stand against him and get votes, they put them in prison. So, well, I don't see that that man is popular at all.
Oh, Jimmy, yeah.
I think one of the things when we're talking about legitimacy is to interrogate a little bit about the kind of claims of some of the leaders about some of the aspects they rely on for the legitimacy. So if we take Uganda, for example, Museveni has consistently talked a lot about how he brought peace to Uganda, and he's brought peace to Uganda for the first time in its history, and to an extent, yes, there has been a long period of stability, but at the same time, there was also conflict in the north of the country for 20 years, which seems to be missed out of that narrative. So people can take the narrative and they can look at it and they can get on board with it, but it's also kind of important to understand that even within these efforts to kind of legitimize themselves or self-legitimize, there is a kind of nuanced understanding to be drawn from that. It's not simply a straightforward question.
And actually, to add on to that, yes, sorry. To add on to that, when you look at Uganda, Museveni in 2001, when, no, not 2001, 96, when he was standing, he told Ugandans that if you don't vote me, Obote is coming back. That was the campaign. So people who had experienced the past wars, nobody could vote against him. When Obote died, now the next campaign, he showed skeletons of people who died during the war. Those that were, during his campaign, those are the pictures on TV which were shown. Every Ugandan who had that past experience, nobody could vote against him because they knew if you don't vote him, another war is coming. Now, what he's saying, if I'm not in power, another conflict is coming. So when you have someone like that, the same applies to Rwanda. During presidential campaigns, they will show you skeletons of people. I'm the one who brought about stability in the country. You can't vote me out. and even credible opposition, they are in prison, no media, so there is no legitimacy.
And before Francine, I want to also add, before Francine answers, to Francine, because, you know, Uganda, Congo, Rwanda, they're all basically interlocked and they're all in the same region, and it is that central region which is so destabilized. So how do you go about fixing that problem?
First of all, I'm going to have to be before I answer the question. I don't believe when people say I believe, and the Guardian actually said it not long ago. Kabila is the one who created, he's the one who triggered the genocide. We need to write the history. Go and look at the Guardian. I think it came out 2-3 weeks ago. Now they start showing, like you stated, they start showing it's not the dialing anymore. They start bringing, the international community start bringing out the truth. And the France government actually, they're going to call someone who used to be close to Kagame to have a kind of like a court tribunal, something like a court justice. So he says he's ready to actually say the truth. Kagame was the one who actually asked. He asked one of his bodyguards to shoot the plane of the former president, who killed 2 presidents from Burundi and the former president of Rwanda. And that's what triggered the genocide. So that's just something I want you to obviously have there. And I'm not creating it. You can read it. You can check on the Guardian. It came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. So basically, and apart from that, I'm going to add also, what they do, most of the dictators of that region I come from, is they control media. In Congo, we don't have a media opposition. They will put them in jail, like you stated. They will arrest them straight away like this. So apart from that, we know that media is the third power. The first power is the parliament. The second power is army. And the third power is media. So they control media. They have Kagame got media. In Rwanda, you don't have opposition media. So when you constantly, I did psychology, my degree, constantly they are praising one person, is a God, is God. Obviously, people, you get used to it. When I was really, really young, about 3 or 4 years old, I remember we experiencing Mobutu used to be like a God in Congo, Zaire. Probably you know the name of Zaire. Mobutu used to be like that. People used to dance, praise Mobutu all over. Until when people found out, Congolese actually decided and they say, no, this is enough. And not me, because I was so young, but my fathers and all the people in that generation, they decided, no. They start teaching Congolese to know their rights. So that's why I'm going to answer your question today, is people need to know their rights. Soon as people from Rwanda, Uganda, other region, Congo, know the right, Congo Brazzaville, because it's so important as well. We have another dictator there. He's been in power since 1979, before most of us were born. So he's still in power, the Mr. Sungesu, the other Congo Brazzaville. So as soon as our people know their right, that's it. Our people, majority of them, they don't know the right. We need to raise the awareness. This is what I'm passionate about. Educate our people to know their right. Because I believe as soon as our people know their right, nobody will come and boss them around again. This is a lot of Congolese people are doing on the ground, and we are supporting them. Also, I usually go to different universities to educate people what's going on in Congo and what's going on in the Great Lake region. Because I know the importance of Congo, GRC. Africa won't develop if GRC is still in that position. It's not me who stated, Kwame Kuma stated, Frank Fanon said it, former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki said it, even Obama said it not long ago. So the issue of Congo or Great Lake region is a really important issue. If you care about Africa, you have to say something about what's going on in Congo, because it affects all of us. He knows what I'm talking about, even both of them. They know what I'm talking about. It's really there. They know because they've been there. They know what actually I'm talking about. He said a couple of important stuff. there. It's it affects all of us, what's going on in Congo. So you have to break the silence and educate the people, because the future of Africa, like in Congo, if you care about children, you have to say something about what's going on in Congo, because a majority of people are dying in Congo are young people under the age of 5. Some of them will run in Uganda, and they will be 12 in Uganda. They will be, so Congo has 9 neighbors. It's the only country without 9 neighbors. It's strategic in the heart of Africa. So if you care about environment, if you care about climate change, you need to say something about what's going on in Congo, because Congo has the second rainforest after the Amazon. And I don't mind Chinese coming in Congo to invest, but they are cutting the trees, and then I do have a problem with it. Obviously, I'm having a problem with it because it's going to cause a lot of atrocity, and all of us say that region will suffer. So if you care about climate change, you have to say something. Raise awareness, education is so important. Lobby is so important. We need to do that. And also, we need to come together as one.
I do want to, I see there's a few hands, and I do want to, just for time-wise, there will be time at the end to kind of, all your questions that you want to ask, there will be time at the end to ask them. But just for time's sake, I'm going to move on to kind of the second bit of this, which is talking about the future, what Francine was alluding to. And I just want to ask this question. I know a few people are moving to... So I'm going to, I'm just going to quickly go on to the next topic. I'll just wait for. So the next topic, obviously, we can't talk about this without talking about a solution, possible solutions, the future. So I'll quickly go to the audience first, because it's been a while, and ask whether you believe the future of kind of changing the system, whether you believe it's white supremacy, whether you believe it's imperialism, whether you believe that it's African leaders being greedy and saying power, and whether you believe it's all free. Is it going to come from social revolution or social evolution, the top or the bottom? So let's open it to the floor. Anyone have any questions?
I don't believe the system will change right now. I tell you why. Because I'm older than most people in this home, and I live in Africa. I live partly in Africa, I live partly in Europe. When I was pensioned, when I got my pension, I decided to go back in Africa. Don't stay in the capital. I didn't stay anywhere else. I went back in my village, because that's how you change system. If you don't go back where you left the people, just sit down in Europe and preaching to yourself, because that's all you do. You preach to yourself, you hear yourself. People in Africa don't listen to you, they don't hear you. I live there, I know what happens. They don't listen to you. Now they got this WhatsApp going all over with fake news and God knows what, and Facebook. People do not listen. The only way you can change Africa is up to each and every one of us. If you say that leader is going to be there and it's not going to change, it's not going to live. One is cultural. When you were born in a small village, there was no socialism there, and it's still not there. You're not going to stand in the pulpit and keep saying, oh, you have to give everybody, and everybody has to dress in the same way, because that is socialism to me. I'm not going to dress like Mao, whatever his name was. African culture does not do that. You stay in a village, it's a small village, it's about 10,000 people, no matter. The chief says something, you go with that. That is what is cultural problem. Until you change it, chieftaincies, which they are trying their best. But it's African culture. I don't know where that lady comes from, but my own African culture, the chief says something and that's it. They say the chiefs are said so, everybody rallies around. And that's the same people are living in our country today. And they will ever remain doing it. Now in my own country, Sierra Leone, there's election there. This government, they went to convention, and it chose who to govern, who should be the next flag bearer. Yeah, flag bearer. The other party did it democratically because they have been used to that. They came in power sometime, they stayed in power for 20 odd years before, and they changed it back to socialism or whatever it is. That is not the people's culture. Africans are capitalists. Like it or lump it, they are capitalists by nature. You, your mother, if you go in a village, you carry a bag of things, and you want to give it to your auntie, you want to give this, she's going to take it. Ah, don't give it to her. It's all mine. They are capitalists by nature. And if anybody tries to say they are socialists, they are wrong. And I am older than you.
I think it's an interesting point. I want to I don't know if anyone wants to say something. I think you've with the strike. Yeah.
Oh, in relation to her point or just discussion just in general?
Either.
Okay, well I would link 1, 2, 3, 4 people's points together about the cultural thing that she's talking about. I think when you said it was about blind obedience, and you said it was about, it's not about them not being able to speak to each other, they're speaking over each other. When Jamie mentioned about the pastors in Nigeria, that's a type of culture. T.B. Joshua predicts American politics, who's going to win, by a vision that he saw from God knows who. And then you see different people when we talk about the Oga mentality and the big guy mentality. There are young people in Nigeria today that will tell you, with no experience whatsoever, they're going to go and be in the House of Rep, and they're going to be the big men, and they're going to be respected. So it's definitely a culture. It's definitely a culture thing, and it's not just down to the way we speak to each other. But in terms of Africans or socialists, bearing in mind, 500 years before any European contact, there was African civilizations. They were doing astronomy, seeing stars that you can't see with the naked eye. The Egyptians gave the world mathematics. We had civilizations that were thriving, and it wasn't based on socialism or capitalism. So we had our own culture, and something has happened along the line. So to remove culture from it and base it on, no offense to the academic writers, but African culture can't be confined into books by non-Africans. It just makes no sense, period.
Yeah. So I want to, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think her point was a really good one, and she talked about, I'd made a point. I think there's a couple of things that are interlinked and have been kind of woven in today. I think culture is kind of the pinnacle of it, but actually culture, blind obedience, but also what stems from that. So one of the themes that's come, or I've been listening to today, is people talking about sort of the West's influence and outsiders. But you can only allow outsiders to influence your community if you have weak institutions and you're not unified, right? And the problem I see, and this is just anecdotal, I'm no scholar or anything, it's just my observations. One of the problems I see with coming from culture of blind obedience and big men syndromes and what have you is that people think it unites them, but actually it does the opposite. And the reason it does the opposite is because someone who looks up to, say, a pastor, they are disempowered to influence their own lives, because what they're doing is they're looking to someone above them who they believe that they can trust, who they believe has their best interests at heart, and it actually puts them in a position where they're easily exploited by people who will want to overstay in power. And if anything, that also extends to another point, which is when you're disunified, being able to move your culture forward, move your society forward is incredibly difficult. And the way I see it, just adding to this lady's point about young people going to Nigeria and thinking that they can do jobs that they're totally unqualified for, the way I see this only changing is genuinely an evolution in people recognising that the culture that has to a degree been adopted from the West around capitalism and around I think some points around the Enlightenment that we've taken but haven't really employed. I think that's really the problem. It's got to be an evolution. Us young people have to recognise that there's something fundamentally wrong with the way that our culture fits in with things like democracy, and maybe that means changing the system, or maybe that means us recognising that it's broken and changing how we see our culture and how we employ our culture into governing ourselves. So that's just one of my points.
So I'll go back to the panelists to ask them those two questions. I mean, those are two quite different but unified points. If I quickly go to the core infrastructure in a lot of these countries where core infrastructure in these countries where leaders overstay their terms, Francine, you did talk about Kabila saying that he needs £1.8 billion, he doesn't have it. The system, we can talk about whether, where the money goes, but then at the end of the day, the institutions in Congo are very poor. There's not a lot of, Congo is a huge country, and there's not a lot of links to Kinshasa, to where the government is. There's not enough for people in, rural Katanga or something to kind of vote, and so there are poor institutions, and I feel like that's the case in a lot of these countries, whether even if the power is decentralized properly, issues of transparency, issues of checks and balances, there's not enough of it, and that's going to take obviously a long time to fix. So then what is the solution then if we're talking about kind of infrastructure and like physically being able to have an election?
First of all, we need to have a leader with vision. Lumumba had a vision of Congo, and that's why they killed him. So we need a leader. Have to be someone. I believe a leader is someone who listens to the people. You are the voice of the voiceless. So what we have is someone who control everything. Kabila is a dictator, so he has no vision of Congo. You have to have that vision of leading Congo. Is a country size of Western Europe, so big country, but you can. I believe change will come in Congo, in Africa in general, if we have leaders with vision, leaders who put the interests of the people first before their own interests, before their own pocket.
So it's more about the vision, and the vision will lead the institutions.
Yeah, with a strong institution, not strong people. For instance, Kagame is a strong man, but Rwanda is not a strong institution. It's going to crumble after Kagame. So I'm not wishing that, but that's what he's doing. A good leader actually prepare a successor. If you don't, you mean you are weak. So there is no future. That's what I don't wish that, because I know what's happened in Rwanda in 1994. We Congolese are paying the price for something we didn't do. The refugees, those who killed in Rwanda, cross over in Congo, and the Kagame still following them, killing innocent Congolese. That's another story. But that's what I'm saying. It's so important. We need a strong institution, a leader with vision, voted by the people. A leader be the voice of the voice, be the voice of the voiceless, not the leader who always listen to the outsider. No, the leader who had a vision, sing, the leader like Sankara who had a vision. That's why the French killed him. So we need to have a leader with vision.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you could argue that's what Museveni was when he came to power in 1986. A leader with vision, socialist. He had strong, ties to Nyeri and stuff at the university. And not to say that, he has clearly moved away from that now, but I think it makes an important point that, you need to think about ways in which, these people can kind of be pushed into institutionalizing themselves so they can extend themselves like what Museveni has been able to do in Uganda. And I think it's a really important question to ask is how and what structures need to be in place to allow these changeovers of power to happen. Is it through an electoral process, and therefore what role do you have for electoral commissions, for example? I mean, Nigeria's electoral commission did a very strong job in 2015 in getting rid of, well, not getting rid, but allowing a process to see a change of power. And I think it's also important to think that we shouldn't always presume that the person that comes in after is going to be any better. Because at the end of the day, like people like Museveni were once the one who was throwing over the leader who'd overstayed his time in power.
Yeah, so let's go to
Can I just add something really quickly? I think that keeping institutions from being developed is often a very, it's done by purpose, that let's not let institutions develop, because God forbid they do, I, as dictator, will have to face potentially coming out of power. So I think that's a tactic in itself to stay in power. And also, if, for example, someone like Joseph Kabila, considering the size of the DRC and considering what he's come from, I wonder, you know, as you say, a vision, I wonder how many of these guys come into power wanting to bring change, and I'm not convinced that they do. Is it that they don't, or is it that they get corrupt along the way? It probably varies. And it comes to the point that you had made, when you look at companies like Glencoe and everything, the reason they can do what they do with complete impunity is kickbacks, money. That's what they offer, and people accept it. So if you're going to do that and allow your country to be exploited while you're a leader, bless you, well, it's unlikely that you're going to want to see, and I think it was Barack Obama who said, even though, you know, whenever anyone from the US says anything, I just want to be like, please. You're shooting black men, like, take a seat kind of thing, but Africa needs strong institutions, not strong men, and I think that does still apply, like, really, really does apply, but yeah.
Yeah, so should we go back to the audience for comments? So,
He's had his hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you. When we talk about this discussion, it's why activist leaders overstay in power, and we kind of maybe overlook the idea of what can we actually do to get rid of them. So when we look at, for example, in Gambia, we've got Gambia in left and stole 2 million. I'm trying to think of the ethics of it. To what extent can we be unethical in getting rid of leaders, considering that they don't play by the rules themselves? And that's kind of an issue I wanted to put to Jamie and to Samira as well.
Yeah, and another one.
I've noticed that a common denominator is a lack of accountability. And in that, I appreciate that you've got horizontal accountability where you've got check and balance systems, and then you've got the vertical, which is about empowering the electorate and journalists and media companies to hold people ransom. But I suppose I always consider whether there should be a more macro approach to accountability, where as a continent there should be some sort of institution that holds presidents ransom, and there's some sort of benchmark. But whether that's realistic or pragmatic, I'm not entirely sure. I suppose I just wanted to ask what your thoughts were on how we can move forward on accountability within Africa.
And it's just one from the back, right at the back. Yeah, we'll see.
I've listened to the conversation so far. My impression is that we're talking from the standpoint of what should happen, not necessarily understanding the reality of the fact. I mean, Africa, as far as I understand, the story of Africa has always been about the buck since the way it was carved up until today. So if we really want to change that, we have to start talking about money. And as people want to change here, the question is what tools have we got in order to have access to the money, at least to divert the money in the right direction? That's my question.
Okay, so do you want to answer it?
I'll start with your one. The reason I think, you know, African Union and all that, who will be the one to come forward and say, right, let's set up something to keep everyone accountable? Because, how many countries on the continent have dictators? I just don't think at this point it's doable, because unless it's a citizen-led movement, nothing is going to change. So that's not something that I see as being possible, because if somewhere like, I don't know, Ghana or South Africa, if they come forward and say, oh, you know, we've had democracy and we're totally against leaders overstaying and we want to set up something to make you accountable. Sovereignty, you are so up against that. That was what the International Criminal Court tried to do. And while it's going for them and not going for Bush and Blair, which in itself is problematic, I don't know if they went for Bush and Blair, that then, prime example, President Bashir of Sudan, like he has travelled across the continent, no one's dobbing him in. So I think that I just don't see how an African-led initiative like that would work when there are so many dictators on the continent.
And just to, because we're going to wrap up quite soon, I do want to ask the panelists, just drawing from what everyone said, about how they believe change will come. So Samira said it was citizen-led. Whether it's going to come from the top, institutionally changing, examples like Gambia and I think recently Kenya's Angola, Kenyan Supreme Court, make sure there's another election, like checks and balances like that, or whether it's going to come from people gathering in the country, doing kind of protests and pushing it through, like something like the Arab Spring, what we saw in like countries like Tunisia. I mean, that in itself is, I'm sure the panelists will talk about how, bloodshed again in countries that have a lot of bloodshed. So again, do you believe it's going to come institutionally, or do you think it's going to come from push from the bottom? Maybe start with Richard.
Yeah, thank you. I believe change is going to come. And when you look at Africa, all dictators are old men. Soon they will die. And then you will have young generation. I believe change is going to come from you, young people, especially you who are here now. You are the change for Africa. You should start doing your work now, advocating for good governance. Organize yourself. Like, this meeting is brilliant, bringing us together to brainstorm. This is the starting point to change Africa. And change will not come from top, it will come from bottom up. Young people organizing yourselves and do something and start getting skills, leadership skills, talking to our fellow Africans back home, educate them through social media. These days, especially WhatsApp is brilliant. Just do a video clip, send it to everybody. It will be shared. Just talk about good governance. When you look at what happened in Burkina Faso, Tunisia, trust me, any leader who comes after that storm, he will be cautious. He will be careful whatever he's doing, because he knows people, they have power. That way, yeah, I believe and I think, well, the world is changing. Change will come, and these men are all going to die. We need to prepare ourselves to take up that leadership.
Back to the top of bottom question.
Okay, for me, like he already stated what I wanted to say is we need to, African youth need to come together, united is the important thing. I remember the founder of Tanzania, Nyerere, said without the African unison, right, without all come together, Africa won't change, things will be just like we are seeing today. So unity is so important. And also we all have to, I believe if our people, like I stated before, they need to know the right, and we need to do what he said, it's happening in Burkina Faso. The young people need to organize themselves, and if the person doesn't want, the constitution is a Bible for the Christian, is a Quran for Muslim, is really the will of people in terms of, like I'm talking in terms of Congolese. In Congo, people voted that constitution. Kabila doesn't want to respect. About 80% of Congolese people voted for that constitution. So it's the voice of people. If the president doesn't want to respect the constitution, we have to do revolution. That's the only way out. We have to do, I know, freedom, you have to fight. fight for it. That's what I believe. If South Africa, we are seeing South Africa today, I know before Mandela could have given up, you know, and no, I don't want to go to prison, I'm going to bow down to apartheid. But Mandela accepted to go to prison. That's what fight is all about. Winnie Mandela, I met him, I met her. Winnie Mandela for the country, she contributed. We have to fight. I believe freedom, you have even this country. In the Second World War, you have to fight. French Revolution, they fought. Freedom, you have to fight for it. So I definitely believe Africa will be free. I believe it because I can see it now. A lot of young people are fighting for the France Africa, the France CFA, French money. In Africa, I'm not, where I come from, we don't use that money, but I have to be part of that movement because it's part of Africa. It's an African issue. So I believe if we come together and then we fight, revolution is the only way out. Tunisia did it. Our forefather, our grandfather did it. Before we all get independence in Kenya, in all parts of Africa, Congo, all the people, Lumumba was 33. All of them, they fought for our independence. So I know they stole our independence after that, but we need to continue to get the proper independence because Africa is not independent yet. We have to be honest. Africa, they still control Africa. So we need to come together as one. I'm going to end with this statement of Lumumba. I really like this statement. He says, without dignity, there is no liberty. Without justice, there is no dignity. And without independence, there are no free man. So we have to come together and fight. That's how the way it is. That's how the world works, function. You want to be free, you have to go on the forefront and fight for the benefit of our children. We have to do, if I'm living in the UK in a peaceful, I'm safe because people fought for it. So there is no way out there. We have to organize ourselves and we need money. The brother up there saying we need money. In Devolution, we need money. Without money, how are we gonna support the movement and all that? We definitely need money. So the richest people we all need to come together and obviously free Africa because Africa is in the heart of the world and it's really, really important for all of us to get together and fight. We did it in apartheid during South Africa movement. There were no, I'm British, I'm not going to fight. Everybody came together, whether you are in Africa, in Europe, and in America. Everybody came together, and then we saw, you can see the result. The unity brings something. Basically, that's what. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe Jamie, and then we'll end on Samir.
Good. Yeah, well, I think the Gambia and Burkina Faso were illustrative examples of different ways in which presidents can be ousted from office who've overstayed their welcome. So, yeah, we've talked a little bit about the popular protest angle in Burkina, and in the Gambia, alongside a popular will to oust the president, there was also strong institutions, both at the national, in terms of the Electoral Commission, and then the regional level with ECOWAS's intervention. I think Richard makes a good point about technology. It's certainly a potential avenue for future mobilization, be that form of political protest or political parties themselves. But I think it's also important to recognize that there are actually a number of countries on the continent who have got presidential systems and that are witnessing changes of power, and whether that is between political parties or within political parties. There has been a number of countries, particularly in West Africa, where that is actually being institutionalized, and there's quite a bit of research that's been done to say that once term limits have been respected, they're very rarely overturned. So what has happened in places like Uganda and Congo and Rwanda is that they never actually had people adhere to those term limits that were in place. Because in West Africa, once the term limits have been in place and people have adhered to them for various reasons, they've actually been able to establish that, and citizens have gained an awareness of that importance and been able to maintain that status quo. So I always like to remain positive and end on positive notes. it's a really kind of important takeaway. I think that whereas the question then is about the quality of the democracy in those countries. That's the separate question and a whole different debate. But I think that it's important to look at and acknowledge where things are doing better and trying to learn from them as much as anything else, and to see how is it that someone like Jammeh can be ousted from power in the Gambia, and what can other countries learn from that? And of course, it's not a cut and paste job. There's a lot of political complications and regional complications at play, but there are things that can be drawn from these examples to understand a little bit more about how people that have overstayed their welcome can be ousted in ways that so far have proved quite positive. But I think to end, it's also important to, and I made this point before, that the person that comes after is not always going to be any better. And it's not to say that they won't or they will, but when they come into power, it's really important to keep the scrutiny on them and say, look, if Kizza Besigye came to power in Uganda, would he be any better than Museveni? The answer is you can't tell until he's there, because Museveni himself was, an idealist once upon a time.
Lastly, Samira.
I'm SOAS alumni, and so I'm all for take to the streets and go with it that way. And I think social media is probably going to be the most important thing, because how many elections have we had recently where it's been blocked? And if that doesn't tell you how much power it has, then I don't know what will. I do think that unfortunately, in many cases, bloodshed. People are gonna have to take to the streets, and there is going to be. People are going to have to die. I genuinely do believe that. In terms of the Jammeh situation, do I think it can happen in other places? I don't know, because they acted on Jammeh. They're not doing it in Togo, and people are dying in Togo every damn day. And there's just complete silence, apart from we urge the government to respect. Well, they're not respecting it, and people are dying. So I think that's a big one, and also. People, you guys, I agree with both Richard and Francine that it really comes down to education as well. I'm a real advocate for, in a lot of these countries, having constitution lessons. Like, you don't know your rights, you don't know when they're being, you just don't know. And so I'm big on that as well. But ultimately, I think it's in the hands of the people. Yep, totally Western companies, Western governments, regional organizations are complicit in dictators staying in power, but it's been done in other parts of the world. Unfortunately, it's just painful and messy. I definitely think that it will change, because there are a lot of countries on that continent where it has changed, but peaceful handover of power is probably the biggest aim in a lot of them right now, in my opinion. So I think social media is where it's at, even though people say, revolutions don't happen behind the keyboard. I think they do, or they can lead to that. And I think, I'm just gonna leave it at that.
So thank you all the panelists for coming today and discussing. Everyone who not only stayed till the end, but came anyway. It's been a real pleasure to have this and to moderate. Again, our Facebook is Voice of Congo SOAS, so we'll have more events like this in the future. Thank you all for coming.
mbala liboso na koti masuwa o